It was a warm summer night on the campus of Vanderbilt University, a place known for its academic prestige and vibrant student life. As the weekend arrived, students filled the streets of Nashville, eager to unwind from their rigorous coursework and the pressures of college life. Bars, clubs, and dorm parties buzzed with youthful energy, and among those out celebrating were members of the Vanderbilt football team. Unbeknownst to anyone, this night would become infamous for an act so heinous that it would send shockwaves throughout the nation. The events that unfolded would not only ruin multiple lives, but also expose the darker side of campus culture, one that thrived on entitlement, unchecked privilege, and a disturbing lack of accountability. Founded in 1873, with a generous donation from railroad magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt, the university stood as a beacon of higher education in the South. Its picturesque campus in Nashville, Tennessee, attracted students from across the country, offering top-tier academics, renowned faculty, and a highly competitive athletics program. The Vanderbilt Commodores football team, though not as dominant as SEC powerhouses like Alabama or LSU, was steadily rising, bringing in top recruits and ambitious young athletes who hoped to make it to the professional level. However, the culture of college sports often came with a dangerous edge. Parties fueled by alcohol, a sense of invincibility among athletes, and a system that often turned a blind eye to misconduct. It was within this environment that a crime unfolded, one that would stain Vanderbilt's reputation for years to come. Among the recruits on Vanderbilt's football team were 4 young men: Brandon Vandenberg, Corey Beatty, Brandon Banks, and Jaborian Tip McKenzie. Each had arrived at Vanderbilt with big dreams. Some saw it as a stepping stone to the NFL, while others simply sought the prestige and opportunities that came with attending a renowned university. They were celebrated on campus, admired for their athleticism, and enjoyed privileges that came with being student athletes. However, beneath the surface, these young men were also susceptible to the toxic influences that often pervaded college sports culture: excessive drinking, peer pressure, and a blurred sense of right and wrong. They believed they were untouchable, protected by their status, and above the rules that applied to ordinary students. This false sense of security would lead them down a path of irreversible destruction. At the center of it all was Brandon Vandenberg, a towering wide receiver who had transferred from the College of the Desert in California. With his good looks, charm, and confidence, he quickly became popular among students. His presence commanded attention, and he thrived in the social scene, enjoying the privileges that came with being an athlete at a prestigious university. However, beneath his charismatic exterior lay a darker persona. One driven by control, dominance, and a disturbing lack of empathy. He had a reputation for pushing boundaries, both on and off the field. His confidence often bordered on arrogance, and he was known to revel in excess, whether it was alcohol, parties, or relationships. When he met the young woman who would later become the victim of an unspeakable crime, he saw her not as a person, but as an object of conquest, something to be manipulated for his own gratification. Unlike Vandenberg, who was a transfer student, Corey Beatty was a Nashville native. Growing up in the city, he had always dreamed of playing football for Vanderbilt, representing his hometown with pride. He was well liked by friends and family, known for his jovial personality and ability to bring people together. However, like many young athletes suddenly thrust into an environment of fame and temptation, he struggled with newfound freedom. The pressure to fit in with his teammates, to keep up with their partying lifestyle, and to prove himself in the social hierarchy of college life led him down a dangerous road. On that fateful night, Beatty, under the influence of alcohol and peer pressure, made choices that would not only destroy his future, but also inflict irreversible trauma on an innocent young woman. What should have been a night of celebration turned into a nightmare, one that he, and the others involved, would never escape. As the night progressed, the energy of the party scene at Vanderbilt grew wilder. Alcohol flowed freely, and students reveled in the carefree atmosphere. Brandon Vandenberg, already intoxicated, was accompanied by his girlfriend, a bright, ambitious young woman who had no idea of the nightmare that awaited her. At some point during the night, she became heavily intoxicated, possibly drugged, leaving her unable to comprehend or control what was happening around her. Instead of ensuring her safety, Vandenberg saw an opportunity to exploit her vulnerable state. With the help of his teammates, he carried her, unconscious, into his dorm room at Gillette Hall. This moment marked the turning point, a descent from a night of casual celebration into an unforgivable act of violence. Once inside the dorm room, Vandenberg, Beatty, Banks, and Mackenzie committed a crime so horrific that it would shake the Vanderbilt community and beyond. The young woman, completely unconscious, was subjected to unspeakable acts, her body treated as a mere object for their entertainment. The players laughed, took photos and videos, and encouraged one another as they carried out their crime. Vandenberg, the ringleader, directed the events, ensuring that the assault was documented on their phones. At no point did any of them hesitate or intervene. Instead, they reveled in their perceived invincibility, believing that their status as football players would protect them from any consequences. What they didn't realize was that their actions had been recorded, not just by their own devices, but by the university's security cameras, which had captured crucial evidence of them carrying the unconscious victim into the dorm. The following morning, as the effects of alcohol and adrenaline wore off, reality began to sink in. But rather than feeling guilt or remorse, Vandenberg and his teammates focused on covering their tracks. Messages were exchanged, urging each other to delete photos and videos. Vandenberg, fearing the potential fallout, pressured the others to remain silent, hoping to erase any trace of their crime. However, their efforts to hide the truth would soon crumble. When the victim woke up, she had no memory of the night before. Only a deep, unsettling feeling that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't until police launched an investigation, uncovering the incriminating security footage and digital evidence, that the horrifying truth was revealed. What had begun as a night of celebration had turned into a crime that would lead to national headlines, a courtroom battle, and the unraveling of promising young lives. As the events of that horrific night remained unknown to most, the perpetrators believed that they had successfully concealed their crime. However, what they didn't account for was the power of modern surveillance and forensic technology. Vanderbilt University had a robust security system in place, with cameras installed throughout campus, including inside the Gillette Hall dormitory. When university security personnel reviewed the footage from the night of June 23, 2013, they noticed something disturbing. The video clearly showed Brandon Vandenberg and his teammates carrying the unconscious woman into the dorm. Their behavior was suspicious, laughing, high-fiving, and appearing to revel in something sinister. Concerned by what they saw, the security team promptly reported the incident to the university administration. Given the gravity of the situation, Vanderbilt's officials wasted no time in escalating the matter to local law enforcement. The Metro Nashville Police Department, NMPD, was contacted, and detectives were assigned to investigate what initially seemed like a case of possible alcohol poisoning or misconduct. But as they dug deeper, the horrifying reality came to light. Detectives immediately secured access to the dormitory where the crime occurred. They began questioning students, dorm staff, and anyone who might have seen or heard anything unusual that night. However, the key to unraveling the case lay in the digital evidence, cell phone data, security footage, and forensic reports that would soon expose the depth of the crime. As part of the standard procedure, the young woman was encouraged to undergo a medical examination. When she visited a local hospital, medical professionals found signs of sexual assault. Though she had no recollection of the events, the physical evidence told its own story. At this point, the case transformed from an investigation into student misconduct to a full-scale criminal investigation. As investigators began piecing together the events of that night, they uncovered a disturbing digital trail. The accused football players had documented their crime using their cell phones, taking photos, recording videos, and sending text messages that not only detailed the assault but also displayed a chilling lack of remorse. Forensic experts were brought in to analyze the contents of the suspects' phones. Despite their attempts to delete evidence, law enforcement's forensic team managed to retrieve the files. The recovered content painted an undeniable picture of guilt. Messages between the players showed them boasting about their actions, making crude jokes, and even discussing ways to avoid getting caught. Vandenberg, in particular, was seen as the orchestrator, sending messages to friends asking for advice on how to permanently erase the footage. The most damning piece of evidence was the video footage found on Vandenberg's phone. It showed the unconscious victim being assaulted in multiple ways, while the perpetrators laughed and encouraged one another. This footage was so graphic and disturbing that even hardened detectives were shocked. It became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case, proving beyond doubt that the victim was incapable of consent and that the assault was premeditated. Meanwhile, the young woman, unaware of what had happened to her, struggled with confusion and physical pain. She confided in a close friend, describing the strange bruises on her body and the soreness she felt. When the friend suggested that she might have been assaulted, she was initially in disbelief. However, as more details emerged, the weight of what had occurred began to sink in. At the same time, whispers about the incident started spreading across the Vanderbilt campus. Students began to hear rumors about what had transpired, and tension grew among the football team. Some players who were not involved felt uneasy about what they had heard, but fear and loyalty kept them silent. However, one brave student decided to break that silence. In any case of sexual assault, especially those involving multiple perpetrators, secrecy is often the key factor that allows the crime to go unpunished. However, in this instance, a fellow Vanderbilt student, a teammate of the accused, became the whistleblower who would change the course of the investigation. Although not directly involved in the assault, this student had overheard conversations among the accused football players. He had also seen disturbing images on one of their phones. Troubled by what he knew, he wrestled with the decision of whether to come forward. He understood that speaking out could make him a target, both socially and within the team, but he also knew that remaining silent would mean allowing an unforgivable crime to go unpunished. He chose to do the right thing. The whistleblower approached a trusted faculty member known for advocating campus safety. Together, they reported the information to the university administration, who then relayed it to law enforcement. With this testimony and the growing pile of evidence, police moved forward with making arrests. On August 9, 2013, the Metro Nashville Police Department issued arrest warrants for Brandon Vandenberg, Corey Beatty, Brandon Banks, and Jaborian Tip McKenzie. The charges were severe: multiple counts of aggravated rape, aggravated sexual battery, and unlawful photography. The arrest sent shockwaves through Vanderbilt University. Students and faculty alike were stunned that such a heinous crime had occurred within their prestigious institution. The university swiftly suspended the accused players from the football team and expelled them from the school. However, the damage had already been done. The case had attracted national attention, igniting discussions about campus safety, the culture of entitlement among student athletes, and the broader issue of sexual violence in universities. As news of the Vanderbilt rape case spread, it sparked outrage across the country. Advocates for sexual assault survivors pointed to the case as yet another example of how power and privilege can be used to exploit and silence victims. Conversations about consent, campus security, and the toxic culture surrounding college athletics dominated national discourse. The university faced immense pressure to reevaluate its policies on student safety, alcohol consumption, and dormitory regulations. Critics accused Vanderbilt of failing to act swiftly enough, arguing that their response exposed deeper issues regarding how institutions handle sexual assault cases involving high-profile students. Meanwhile, the legal battle was just beginning. The four accused men, now facing serious felony charges, each secured defense attorneys who were prepared to fight aggressively on their behalf. Vandenberg's family, in particular, hired a high-profile lawyer in hopes of minimizing his potential sentence. The prosecution, led by District Attorney General Tory Johnson, was determined to ensure that justice was served. Armed with overwhelming digital evidence, forensic reports, and testimony from both the victim and the whistleblower, they built a strong case against the defendants. The defense teams attempted multiple strategies to shift the narrative. They argued that the young men had been heavily intoxicated and that their actions were influenced by peer pressure and alcohol. They also attempted to cast doubt on the victim's account, despite the clear forensic evidence proving she had been unconscious and incapable of consent. However, the prosecution remained steadfast, countering each defense argument with hard facts. As the trial date approached, the stage was set for one of the most high-profile campus sexual assault cases in recent history. As the trial against the accused football players began, the prosecution meticulously prepared to present their case. The weight of justice hung in the balance, and the team, led by District Attorney Tory Johnson, was determined to ensure accountability. The prosecution's primary focus was to establish three key arguments: the victim's incapacitation, the digital evidence proving the assault, and the defendant's culpability beyond a reasonable doubt. Building the case with forensic and digital evidence. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was the surveillance footage from the Vanderbilt dormitory, which showed the unconscious victim being carried into the building. Prosecutors played this footage in court, allowing the jury to witness the disturbing reality of the case. The victim was entirely unaware of what was happening to her, and this was the cornerstone of the prosecution's argument: consent was never a possibility. In addition to the surveillance footage, forensic specialists presented data recovered from the suspects' cell phones. Despite their efforts to delete incriminating files, digital forensic experts retrieved videos and images that depicted the assault in horrifying detail. These images showed the defendants not only engaging in the assault, but also laughing, mocking, and treating the entire event as entertainment. Medical testimony and expert analysis. Medical professionals who had examined the victim provided critical testimony about her condition. They described the physical trauma that was consistent with non-consensual acts and explained how alcohol had rendered her incapable of defending herself. The prosecution also called upon toxicologists to confirm that, based on her reported alcohol consumption, the victim was likely experiencing complete unconsciousness or severe impairment at the time of the assault. Witness testimonies and the culture of silence. The prosecution's case was further strengthened by witness testimonies. One of the most crucial witnesses was a fellow student and teammate who had come forward after learning about the assault. This individual testified about the disturbing conversations that took place after the incident. He recalled how the defendants laughed about what they had done and expressed no remorse. Several other students testified to seeing the victim heavily intoxicated before she was taken into the dorm room. These testimonies reinforced the argument that she was in no condition to consent and that the defendants were fully aware of her vulnerability. With their case built on irrefutable evidence, the prosecution was confident that justice would be served. However, they knew that the defense would fight aggressively to protect their clients. While the prosecution had a strong case, the defense attorneys for each of the accused players developed different strategies to lessen their clients' culpability. Their goal was to create doubt in the jury's minds and present their clients in a more sympathetic light. Claiming intoxication as a factor, one of the key defense arguments was that the defendants were themselves heavily intoxicated and unable to comprehend the gravity of their actions. They claimed that alcohol impaired their judgment and decision-making, making them incapable of forming criminal intent. This argument sought to reduce the severity of the charges by suggesting that the acts were more reckless than premeditated. Shifting blame and the ringleader argument. Another defense tactic was to suggest that Brandon Vandenberg, who had invited the victim back to the dorm, was the primary instigator of the assault. The defense attorneys for the other accused players attempted to portray their clients as reluctant participants who were pressured into involvement. This argument was particularly important for the defense attorneys representing Banks and McKenzie, as they sought to distance their clients from the most damning actions recorded on video. By shifting blame to Vandenberg, they hoped to create a narrative in which their clients were merely bystanders who got caught up in the moment. Victim-blaming strategies and character attacks. Although the defense attorneys were careful not to overtly blame the victim, they subtly suggested that her level of intoxication and decision to drink that night played a role in the incident. This tactic aimed to plant a seed of doubt in the jury's mind by implying that she had placed herself in a vulnerable situation. However, the prosecution swiftly countered this argument by reinforcing the principle that an unconscious person cannot provide consent, regardless of their prior actions. They reminded the jury that victim blaming had no place in a case where the evidence was overwhelming. Courtroom drama and jury reactions. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom became a battleground between the prosecution and the defense. The jury listened intently as each side presented its arguments. The defendants sat silently, their futures hanging in the balance. The public followed the trial closely, with widespread media coverage igniting debates about sexual assault, consent, and accountability. With both sides having presented their arguments, it was now up to the jury to determine whether the defendants would be held accountable for their actions. After days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom was filled with tension as the judge prepared to announce the fate of the accused. Family members of both the victim and the defendant sat anxiously, awaiting the outcome that would shape their lives forever. Guilty verdict and sentencing recommendations. The jury found the primary defendants guilty on multiple counts, including aggravated rape, aggravated sexual battery, and unlawful photography. The evidence against them had been too overwhelming to ignore. Brandon Vandenberg and Corey Beatty were found guilty on all charges as they were the most actively involved in the assault. Brandon Banks and Jaborian McKenzie, who had been present but participated to a lesser extent, faced varying degrees of legal consequences. Following the verdict, the sentencing phase began. The prosecution pushed for the maximum sentences, arguing that the crime was particularly heinous and warranted severe punishment. The defense attorneys, however, pleaded for leniency, emphasizing their clients' young ages and potential for rehabilitation. Public and media outrage. The trial had captured national attention, sparking debates about sexual violence, consent, and the responsibility of universities in addressing campus assaults. Many advocacy groups praised the guilty verdict, viewing it as a step toward justice for survivors of sexual assault. However, there were also those who questioned the fairness of the trial, arguing that the defendants' promising futures had been permanently destroyed by their actions. Some supporters of the accused players suggested that the culture of college sports and alcohol-fueled parties played a significant role in the tragedy. Despite these discussions, the overwhelming majority agreed that the verdict was justified, as it reinforced the principle that sexual assault is a serious crime with severe consequences. The Vanderbilt rape case left a lasting impact, not only on the individuals involved, but also on the national conversation about campus sexual assault. The repercussions extended beyond the courtroom, affecting policies, advocacy efforts, and societal attitudes toward consent and accountability. Impact on the victim and her recovery. For the victim, the verdict provided a sense of justice, but the scars of the assault remained. She continued to navigate the psychological and emotional trauma of what had happened to her. Support from advocacy groups, family, and therapists played a crucial role in her journey toward healing. Her bravery in testifying against her attackers inspired other survivors to come forward with their stories. Her case became a symbol of resilience and the fight for justice in sexual assault cases. Changes in university policies and nationwide reforms. In the wake of the case, universities across the country reevaluated their policies on sexual assault and consent education. Vanderbilt University in particular faced scrutiny over its handling of the incident and took steps to implement stricter measures to prevent future cases. The case also contributed to the national conversation about the role of bystanders and the importance of intervening when witnessing potential harm. Universities began promoting bystander intervention programs to educate students about the dangers of remaining silent in situations of sexual violence. Legal precedents and the future of sexual assault cases. The Vanderbilt case set a legal precedent in handling digital evidence and social media in sexual assault trials. The use of recovered videos and messages played a crucial role in securing convictions, demonstrating how modern technology can aid in seeking justice. Ultimately, the case served as a reminder that accountability is essential, regardless of status, background, or athletic ability. The 4 young men involved had been promising athletes with bright futures. But their actions had consequences that could not be ignored. After months of legal battles, emotional testimonies, and intense media scrutiny, the trials of the 4 accused Vanderbilt University football players reached their conclusion. The jury, having heard all the evidence, deliberated on the fate of Brandon Vandenberg, Corey Beatty, Brandon Banks, and Jaborian McKenzie. The prosecution had built a strong case, relying heavily on the shocking surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and digital communications between the perpetrators. The most damning pieces of evidence included the explicit photos and videos found on the defendants' phones, as well as their disturbing messages where they showed no remorse for their actions. The courtroom was filled with tension as the jury returned with its decision. Family members of both the accused and the victim sat in anxious silence. The victim, surrounded by her loved ones, had endured a grueling legal process, forced to relive the traumatic events repeatedly during the trial. When the jury foreman read the verdict, the weight of justice finally descended. Brandon Vandenberg and Corey Beatty were found guilty of multiple counts of aggravated rape and aggravated sexual battery. The verdict came swiftly, with the jury taking only 3 hours to deliberate, a testament to the overwhelming evidence against them. The decision sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Vandenberg, who had been the orchestrator of the assault, sat motionless, while Beatty appeared visibly shaken. Their families broke into tears, struggling to reconcile the horrific crimes with the young men they once knew. The courtroom remained emotionally charged as the guilty verdicts were read aloud. Some onlookers wept quietly, while others breathed sighs of relief. The victim, though still grappling with the trauma, found solace in the fact that justice had been served. The case had brought national attention to the issue of campus sexual assaults, sparking debates about consent, college athletics, and the role of universities in preventing such crimes. Despite the verdict, the defense teams quickly announced their intent to appeal, claiming procedural errors and arguing that media attention had influenced the jury. However, legal experts believed that the overwhelming evidence left little room for the verdicts to be overturned. With the guilty verdicts secured, the next phase of the legal process was sentencing. Under Tennessee law, aggravated rape carries a minimum sentence of 15 years with no possibility of parole before the full sentence is served. Given the severity of the crime, prosecutors sought the maximum penalty to ensure that the perpetrators faced the full consequences of their actions. In April 2016, Corey Beatty became the first of the defendants to be sentenced. The judge, acknowledging the brutality of the crime and the trauma inflicted on the victim, handed him a 15-year prison sentence. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Advocacy groups and supporters of the victim praised the ruling as a strong message against sexual violence, while Beatty's family expressed devastation, arguing that he had been led astray by alcohol and peer pressure. Brandon Vandenberg received an identical sentence later that year. The prosecution had argued that Vandenberg played the most significant role in the assault, not only participating but also encouraging and recording the attack. He had attempted to delete evidence and mislead investigators, actions that further cemented his guilt. The judge, in delivering the sentence, emphasized that Vandenberg's actions were calculated and callous, making his punishment justifiable. Brandon Banks faced trial separately and was convicted in June 2017 on multiple counts, including aggravated sexual assault and aggravated sexual battery. Like his co-defendants, he received a 15-year sentence. Jaborian McKenzie, who had initially been charged alongside the others, had cooperated with law enforcement, providing testimony that helped secure the convictions. In exchange for his cooperation, McKenzie reached a plea deal and was sentenced to probation, avoiding prison time. The legal outcomes of the case underscored the gravity of the crimes and the importance of holding perpetrators accountable. The sentencing of the Vanderbilt players served as a precedent for handling campus sexual assault cases, reinforcing that no amount of athletic prestige or social standing could shield individuals from justice. The Vanderbilt rape case had a profound impact beyond the courtroom. As news of the verdicts and sentencing spread, reactions poured in from across the country. Women's rights organizations and advocates for sexual assault survivors praised the ruling, seeing it as a crucial victory in the fight against campus sexual violence. Many emphasized that the case should serve as a warning to universities and athletic programs that protecting victims should take precedence over preserving the reputations of athletes and institutions. However, the case also sparked heated debates. Some argued that the role of alcohol in the incident should have been given more weight in determining accountability. Others believed that the university had not done enough to prevent such a crime in the first place. Critics pointed out that had it not been for the security footage, the perpetrators might have never been caught, raising concerns about how many similar cases go unnoticed or unreported. Vanderbilt University faced intense scrutiny for its handling of the case. While the university had cooperated with law enforcement and expelled the players, many felt that more proactive measures could have been taken to prevent the assault. In response to the backlash, Vanderbilt implemented new policies, including mandatory sexual assault prevention training for all students and stricter guidelines for athletes regarding behavior and alcohol consumption. The case also reignited national conversations about rape culture, consent, and accountability in college sports. Many other universities faced renewed pressure to address similar issues, leading to policy changes across multiple institutions. The conversation extended to social media, where hashtags and awareness campaigns encouraged survivors to share their stories and push for reforms. For the victim, the aftermath was a difficult journey of healing. She had endured intense public scrutiny, reliving her trauma in court and in the media. However, her courage in pursuing justice inspired many others to come forward about their own experiences with sexual violence. She became an advocate for survivor rights, using her story to educate others on the importance of consent and the dangers of unchecked power dynamics on college campuses. Years after the trial, the Vanderbilt rape case remained one of the most talked about campus assault cases in recent history. It set legal precedents for how such crimes should be handled and reinforced the importance of video evidence in securing convictions. The case also highlighted the role of bystander intervention. How the willingness of university staff to report suspicious activity ultimately led to the arrests of the perpetrators. For Vanderbilt University, the case became a turning point. The administration worked to rebuild trust with students and the public by improving campus safety measures. Programs aimed at educating students about sexual consent and bystander intervention became mandatory, and greater accountability measures were placed on student athletes. On a broader scale, the case contributed to a shift in how campus sexual assaults were discussed and prosecuted. In the wake of the case, many universities revised their policies, ensuring that survivors had more support and that perpetrators faced swift and decisive action. The conversation about sexual violence in college sports also gained momentum, leading to increased scrutiny of athletic programs and their role in fostering a culture of accountability. The convicted players, now serving their sentences, faced the reality of their actions. For many of them, the possibility of an NFL career, a dream that had once seemed within reach, was completely erased. Instead of being remembered for their athletic abilities, they became infamous for their involvement in one of the most disturbing campus crimes in history. The case served as a stark reminder of the consequences of sexual violence and the importance of speaking out against injustice. It reinforced that no amount of privilege, athletic status, or social influence could protect those who commit heinous acts. Most importantly, it emphasized the power of survivors to seek justice, no matter how difficult the journey. As time passed, the victim continued to reclaim her life, finding strength in advocacy and healing. Her story, though tragic, became a catalyst for change, ensuring that future generations of students would be more aware, more vigilant, and more committed to creating safer environments for all.